Excellent. Welcome back. I'm glad everyone took that large break. So it's great to have everyone here. There's a couple things I want to kind of dive into, and I'm sure we'll weave in and out of some of your answers. The empath, sorry for lack of a better word, the empathetic side, I think, is a trait that we see quite often in the people that succeed in our industry. I think when people just chase the dollar, like I want to get my CISSP, I want to do this just because it pays more, they lose sight and then they fall into common traps. I think that the true MSPs that succeed start from a level of help and empathy. So I wasn't shocked to hear that, but it's always nice to hear that at the top there. Um, I have to ask though, because I think I found a kindred spirit in the pastime and hobby section. What are some of them? What do you got?
Oh gosh. So I mentioned languages.
Yep.
Before Italian, I was learning Thai. Before Thai, I did American Sign Language.
Nice, nice.
Before that, I did Japanese. I did Spanish. I did a little bit of French, a little bit of
So a
Chinese.
polyglot, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I
Amazing.
wouldn't say I'm fluent in all of these languages, mainly
Mhm.
because I don't practice all of them regularly,
Yeah.
but I think I'm more interested in linguistics
Hmm.
than like the grammatical part of it. Is I find it really interesting how people use language and how languages develop and how
Yep.
they're different from each other. So that's
Excellent.
what I tend to kind of dive into.
Fantastic. Yeah, I know for me, it's just, it would have been like 3D printing at one point and then, dealing with like computers behind me. That's always something going on. But I think like I don't know if it's the ADD esque brain or whatever it is like, ooh, shiny. And let's learn more about that. I can't just let things settle. Right. So
Definitely.
that's always it. Um, you'd mentioned a lot of your volunteer work and stuff as well, and your ability to give back. Was there anything in particular that stood out? Any maybe obviously your time with formerly CompTIA, and again I'm going to have you correct me on this one because we're hot off the press. the Yep.
Yeah.
um,
GTIA, Global
GTIA.
Technology. Oh gosh, what is it? Industry Association.
I'll edit that. I'll make it good. Yeah.
Global
It's yeah.
Technology Industry Association.
Yeah, we're talking, a legacy in the industry rebranding, and it's been 72 hours, I think, since the title change. So we're really fresh at the time of this recording. But was there any particular volunteer agency or anything that kind of stood out for you, or maybe you're constantly working with still that is of importance?
I've worked with a few different in our industry, like WESIS, which is Women in Cybersecurity. I've
Yep.
worked with them. There was an organization when I was in Vermont called Vermont Works for Women, and it
Mhm.
was for women who were starting their careers or transitioning through a career or getting back into the workforce. Um, and so I've also done a lot on my own too, just people that I've talked to through the years. And I'm like, this is somebody I want to keep in touch with and help them
Right.
through their career and stuff.
Amazing.
Another hot off the press, I'm starting a group within my company, Craft Kennedy, that is for empowering women. I would say we're calling it Women Plus
Hmm.
because it's an inclusive organization, inclusive group within the organization, and we're going to be focusing on specific skills that Women Plus need in order to succeed well in a
Amazing.
male-dominated industry, just like we have,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I know that's I think, not to go too far back, but where I met a lot of like our mutual connections, like Alex Farling and stuff, was through a beard shave charity that Matt Lee ran at IT Nation. So I was one of the shavees, and one of the charity foundations was Women Who Code, and we all got to choose where our half of the donation pool went. And I'm Canadian based, so a lot of them were like U.S. based or specific or veterans, and they're all extremely worthy causes. But the one that resonated with me was the Women Who Code because I have a young daughter and I see and a son, and they're both very much like me. But my daughter, I can see it in her. She likes to build, she likes to take things apart. So she's going to have a lot of that and will likely enter a very similar field. And I think we're seeing a much needed shift in the industry. I can't recall who I was talking to about this, but I remember going to, we'll call it a conference event, like one of our channel large events, and there was only one booth that had booth babes, and that was like a very much shift in the industry, and they knew they had messed up when they showed up. because the next day they weren't there anymore. Like the booth babes had left and they were dressed regularly and still pitching the product. And that was a really refreshing thing to see, where it's like the tides are turning and we're part of that current. So like, how do we direct? So I don't want to say there's an old guard, new guard happening, but I think we're seeing the shift and the evolution, and we need people to kind of push for that. So that it's amazing to hear that, we're seeing other initiatives kind of crop up around these kind of items. Because, I want her to have the same opportunity that I have, probably the highest privileged person you get, white male. Right. So like, I want to make sure things are where they need to be for her to succeed with that. It's great.
Absolutely. When I was starting my career in the late 90s, we had barely any female CEOs, much
Mm-hmm.
less women in tech that I could look up to. So that's why it's so important for me to give back whenever, wherever I can, and not just to women. I tend to focus on women because that's who I identify with the most,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I've had lots of men who have been mentees of mine through the years. And what I'll say to any woman in the industry is it's not men versus women. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's super important because there's so many men like yourself who are allies, who want to see more women succeed. They want to see, more women in technical positions. And
Mm-hmm.
unless if we can create the culture where it's acceptable and supported, it's not going to happen. And that's why I like to have create the platform to have this voice and to say, we are just the same as everybody else and we can do all the same
Yeah.
work everybody else does. We may not be a bro, but that's okay. We have something else to offer.
Yeah, that bro culture thing, I can't do that. We've got, so internally at, where I work at PAX 8, like we've got a really, it is a male dominant, like we represent Azure, and like I don't even, and this is probably a fault of my own, I don't know anybody that even specializes as deeply as we tend to, that would identify as a woman. And that's just, we're probably talking years of just suppression and just the way things tend to roll out. I think back to like even college, there was 256 of us that started the course. In that course there was three females, and semester one, two of them dropped out, and only one, a good friend of mine, we made it all the way through to the end. And I was like, that ratio is insane to me, right?
Yes.
1 to 256 graduates. So there's definitely some groundwork to be done there. I think it's any company that doesn't adopt the views of others that might not align with them, I think is just very short-sighted in general, right? If you're not getting other sides or other views or anything like that, you're missing entire sections of industry and entire sections of just ways of thinking. So we're seeing the shift. It needs to keep happening, and I'm super glad it is. Um, why that book? Why Split the Difference? Adequate. Like
So
it's a popular one, so
it is.
you're in good
So
company, but
I have it on CDs, audio CDs. That's how old mine is. Um, and I love it because, like, one, it's super entertaining, right? The
mm-hmm.
author is an FBI international hostage negotiator,
Yep,
right? He's got to have interesting stories.
for
So it's
sure.
very
Yeah.
engaging, but the core of the book is emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And every conversation we have is a negotiation. There's something I want, or I want from you, or I want you to do, or vice versa. Maybe something I don't want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's a negotiation. And we just don't label it that way. So most people think of negotiation as very adversarial, I
Negative
want all the money.
connotations. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not really what negotiation is most of the time in our industry. When
Mm-hmm.
we're talking, I do a fair amount of client strategy education, and I bring that up a lot. Having every conversation with your point of contact, that's a negotiation. There's something you
Mm-hmm.
want to get out of it, and there's something they want to get out of it. And
Yep.
at the end, you need some sort of agreement. So, kind of rephrasing it and kind of making it more digestible and a little more
Right.
approachable, I think that book helps a lot. I mean, it's extreme examples in a lot of cases
Right.
because
Yeah.
it's not life or death for us in most cases.
Well,
But
it's not to be overly dramatic, but like for the sole business owner, like it can be, right? Like
mhm,
if this deal lands or doesn't, like determines whether I stay operational next month or not, right? And
yeah,
this goes like 3 or 4 levels deep into conversations and things like that. But when we're looking at organizations that need to be successful, there's just more on the line than just their, like, if they have other businesses they're propping up, families, other employees and things like that. These are important things to be able to acknowledge and succeed at, because if you fail, it's not just you that close the business. You close the business and have rippling effects on the other businesses you support, right? And to your point of wanting to see the industry improve themselves, if they're not able to negotiate proper rates, proper profitability, and they're just racing to the bottom, essentially they have to start cutting corners somewhere, which lack security practices, lower paid employees, people care less, just, and it becomes a self-deprecating cycle. So
Yeah.
it's, I feel like if you put enough into it, you can like connect all the dots, Charlie Day style, not like Always Sunny. But
Yeah.
in the end, I think that's a probably a really good book to read, just to kind of get a baseline of, just because it's a negotiation doesn't mean it's a fight, right?
Right.
It's positive outcomes can happen from these. Both parties can succeed, right? Just because I have to negotiate doesn't mean someone has to lose, right? And I think that's a big thing that often gets overlooked, right? That's
Absolutely.
amazing.
So I think the other reason that I really like that book is because in order for Chris Voss to understand his adversary, and they were adversaries in his case,
Mm-hmm.
he had to put himself in their shoes. He had to think like them. He had to
Yep.
understand what made them tick, what were they afraid of,
Mm-hmm.
what was motivating them. That's exactly what we need to do from a client strategy perspective to understand our clients. What's important to them? What are their fears? What are their
Mm-hmm.
goals? What's holding them back? What are their motivators? All of those things are just as important as how does the money flow through
Yep.
your organization? Where do you get your revenue? What are your biggest expenses? Those are all super important things from a client strategy perspective. If you're
Mm-hmm.
going to show value to your client, you're either selling products or you're accomplishing business goals with them.
Yep. It's funny. It kind of brings it back to the top of you being an empathetic person. You need to
Yes,
have empathy in the business sometimes. That
that's
that can
right.
be a very hard thing too, though, because like there is an emotional investment that sometimes comes into that.
Yeah.
And as as being an empathetic person, it is, you can become emotionally invested in things and they take a toll. So it's, emotional intelligence being the other side of that is very
Yes.
important. Um, the last thing that I thought was really funny is, you would like to see people, vendors, to stop selling widgets, which was funny because of my alternate reality of what I do. But I don't think we handle ourselves that way. But I do agree, and I've had conversations with partners in the past, even from the line of like, if your marketing collateral, your entire success is gated around the marketing success of the best in class, whatever top right quadrant EDR, I go, you're just setting yourself up for disaster, because no one stays in that top right quadrant forever, right? No one is infallible. And if you align your entire personality and business around that, what happens when they slip up, right? It's to not like air anybody out, but I think, CrowdStrike being probably the more one in recent memory. I think I've seen six more that come out the last month, but you have a major rippling effect. And my mom's calling me being like, do we have CrowdStrike? What's a CrowdStrike? Like she's never worked in the industry, but like it becomes such a rippling. Could you imagine aligning your business to something like that? Being like, we're number one CrowdStrike partner, you're in good hands, and then that
Right.
happens. What do you do? Short of throwing all your marketing collateral out and be like, well, we decided to pivot. Like it's a hard conversation. So that's the jump that MSPs usually tend to make, is like the maturity of like, we sell solutions, we sell value,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you align with us, like, if CrowdStrike's the best, like we might have aligned with that, but that's one piece of the puzzle that you need to solve these problems, or the tools. It is just a tool, right? The people, the value, what we drive, the business outcomes is what matters. And that's why we're worth the extra money. That's why we're worth considering over the competition. That's how we differentiate. But becomes a very difficult thing sometimes to make that transition, because that's how we sell to them sometimes. It's like, oh, you're on this product, that product sucks, use this one instead. Look how good it is, right? And it's a very hard thing to do, to break that cycle sometimes. So
Right.
I
And
would
we want
agree.
to be
Yeah.
more than a reseller. As an MSP, you don't want to just
Yeah.
resell
You're
somebody
not a
else's
VAR.
product. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to add value. You're going to have your own labor going to it. You're going to have your own
Mhm.
processes. It'll affect different clients differently depending on the product. These are
Yep.
all things to consider, right? If we, the MSP, are managing that product, if
Mhm.
we're responsible for the configurations of it and supporting it, it
Yep.
can't be about the product. It can't be about the tool. It's got to be about the solution.
Yeah. And that's a lot of just, I would take that mentality and recommend any business order owner run that through any decision they make, right? From an MSP side, like even the vendors you choose, the marketplace, the partners, the distributors you align with, even sometimes the clients you engage with. If you've got a client that is, okay, they're going to pay the bill, but it takes them 90 plus days and you're essentially acting as a bank for them. Like that's not healthy for anybody, right? So, applying this both from your sales side and then like from how you run your business, I think would just slowly develop into a very healthy thing. So,
And I would say
um,
on that point, there's a phrase that I love to say. If you keep your client experience at the front of your decision making, you will make good decisions. And that's true of your marketing, true of your sales, true of your client strategy, true of your
mhm,
IT support, all of it. As
yeah,
an entire business model, think about the client experience, whether it's the end user or bringing value to the business owner. Both are
for
very
sure.
important.
Yeah. And that sometimes can be a very hard thing for our industry because a lot of the people that start these businesses are not, I don't say they're not empathetic, but they tend to be solution oriented. So they find problems and they fix them. And
Yes.
sometimes it's different. It's not a black and white solution. There's gray areas, and that's where it gets hard for MSPs.
Absolutely.
So,
So
so I'll,
I had an MSP years ago before we called it an MSP,
mm,
and I started an MSP because I love technology. I loved working on
yep,
servers. I loved fixing those problems. When I started that business, that's when I realized what else goes into it, and I thought
yep,
to myself, I need to learn accounting. I need to learn marketing. I need to learn sales. I need to learn client
yep,
strategy. All of these things, but it was also, wait a minute, if I'm learning all this, that means this is like the
yep,
same across all businesses. So this is
right.
what's connecting me as a person to this other business owner as a person. And that's
Hmm.
when it kind of bubbled up to me of how important it was to understand how their business runs inside and out so that I could give better recommendations.
Yeah,
So, starting an MSP because you love server work is fantastic, but
yeah,
understand it's so much more than that. And that's only one small component.
yeah. I would say, if you're doing it right, that should be less than 5% of your workday is fixing a
Yeah,
broken server, right? Yeah. Oh man, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. It was an absolute pleasure to meet you. Looking forward to having the chance to kind of meet in person someday. I know the channel flows as it does and drops people in the same spots occasionally. So I'm sure we'll get a chance to meet in person. Thank you
definitely.
so
Looking forward
much.
to it. Thank you for
Thank you
having
so
me.
much for your time. Excellent. Take care, everyone.